The young and the restless. The shocking truth about Damien unfolds in Genoa City. The dimly lit study of the Newman estate was filled with a suffocating tension. The heavy oak desk, the crystal decanter of whiskey, and the meticulously arranged family portraits all bore witness to countless high-stakes confrontations that had taken place in this very room. Tonight was no different. Victor Newman, a man whose mere presence could make even the strongest tremble, sat comfortably in his leather chair. His steely gaze was fixed on the young man standing before him, Kyle Abbott. Kyle had been summoned without explanation, and as he shifted uncomfortably on his feet, he had no idea that what he was about to hear would change everything. Victor's ultimate power move. Victor leaned forward, his voice a controlled whisper, low, yet powerful enough to strike fear into anyone's heart. "Sit down, Kyle," he ordered. Kyle hesitated but eventually obeyed, perching stiffly on the edge of the chair, his palms sweaty with anticipation. Victor poured himself a glass of whiskey but didn't offer any to Kyle. This was not a friendly chat. This was a warning. "Do you have any idea what kind of woman you're involved with?" Victor's voice was smooth, yet laced with contempt. Kyle swallowed hard. He had been expecting some kind of intervention. He knew that his relationship with Claire had caused quite a stir among the Newmans. But he had no idea what Victor was getting at. "She killed Jordan." The words hit Kyle like a sledgehammer. His heart slammed against his ribs as he tried to process what he had just heard. What?" he stammered, blinking rapidly. Victor didn't blink. "Claire killed Jordan, the very woman who raised her. She ended her life without hesitation. That's the kind of woman you're in love with." Kyle felt like the ground beneath him had just collapsed. His head spun. Claire? A killer? The woman he had fallen for, the woman he had imagined a future with. Had murdered the person who raised her? His throat went dry. His mind screamed at him to deny it, to defend her, but he couldn't. Victor watched him, knowing exactly what was happening inside Kyle's fragile mind. He could see the young man unraveling, doubt and fear consuming him. Kyle was not a strong man. He was not the type to handle pressure well. He was emotional, impulsive, and, above all, easily manipulated. Victor had known this from the start. That's why this confrontation was happening in the first place. Kyle would never survive in the ruthless world of the Newmans, not if he couldn't even handle a truth like this. Kyle's breakdown. Kyle stood abruptly, shaking his head. No. No, that's not possible. Claire isn't like that. She wouldn't. Victor's laughter was sharp and cold. You think she's some innocent victim? You think she didn't know exactly what she was doing? Kyle's breathing grew shallow. His mind raced. Why? Why hadn't Claire told him? Why had she kept something like this from him? And worse, what if Victor was right? What if Claire really was a murderer? The thought sent a chill down his spine. He had Harrison to think about. The moment the realization hit him, Kyle's panic intensified. He had been so caught up in his feelings for Claire that he had failed to consider what this meant for his son. He whispered, almost to himself, "Harrison." Victor smirked, sensing his victory. "That's right, boy. Do you really want your son around someone who's capable of cold-blooded murder?" Kyle's mind was in chaos. He knew Claire had been through hell. Jordan had tortured her, manipulated her, shaped her into a weapon against the Newmans. Claire had only ever wanted to escape. He had seen the scars she carried, both physical and emotional. But had he misjudged her? Had he been blind to something far darker inside her? Had she truly done this just to survive, or was she capable of something much more terrifying? The judgment that came too fast. Kyle wanted to believe Claire had only done what was necessary. That she had been cornered and had no choice but to defend herself. But fear had already taken root in his heart, poisoning his thoughts. He thought about Harrison. His little boy, innocent, trusting, defenseless. Could he risk having Claire anywhere near his son? His stomach churned as doubt clouded his judgment. The love he felt for Claire suddenly felt like a mistake. Victor watched as Kyle spiraled into uncertainty, knowing exactly where this was headed. He had planted the seed of fear, and now it was blooming into full-blown paranoia. Victor and Victoria's plan. This wasn't just Victor's doing. He wasn't acting alone. Victoria had been part of this plan from the start. She had agreed Kyle and Claire had to end. Victoria had been wary of Claire from the beginning. The girl was unstable, damaged, and now dangerous. Victoria wasn't about to let some broken, unpredictable woman infiltrate their family, especially not through Kyle. She and Victor had agreed on one thing: they would use Kyle's weakness against him. His overly emotional, sensitive nature made him the perfect target. If they could make him afraid, he would back away from Claire without hesitation. They had been right. Kyle was already breaking. The end of Kyle and Claire? Kyle's hands trembled as he clenched them into fists. His breath was ragged, his thoughts fragmented. He couldn't do this. He couldn't be with Claire anymore. The love he had felt was now tainted with fear. He turned to Victor, his voice barely above a whisper. What do I do?" Victor leaned back, satisfied. "You do what any responsible father would do, Kyle. You walk away. You cut ties. You end it. For Harrison's sake." Kyle closed his eyes. He knew Victor was right. He had to end it. No matter how much it hurt. What comes next? Kyle left the Newman estate that night with a hollow heart. His mind was made up. He couldn't be with Claire. Not now. Not ever. But what would Claire do when he told her? Would she understand? Or would she see his decision as the ultimate betrayal? And most terrifying of all, what if Claire didn't take no for an answer? Title: Fragile Hearts and Shattered Loyalties. Claire sat alone in the dimly lit loft, shadows flickering against the walls like the ghosts of her past. The images in her mind refused to fade: Jordan's pained expression, the final moments, and the blood on Claire's shaking hands. Night after night, she was haunted by what had happened, by the sheer force of her own actions. Deep down, she knew she had done what she had to do to survive, but that truth felt cold comfort now. And now, the one person she trusted, Kyle, had abandoned her, just when she needed him most. The breaking point: Claire had believed that, despite all her trauma, she could finally look toward the future. She had found solace in Kyle's tender words, in the promise that she wouldn't have to face her nightmares alone. But in a single conversation with Victor Newman, everything changed. Kyle had always been easily swayed, easily manipulated. His sensitive nature made him an easy target for Victor's cunning. After hearing Victor's damning revelations about Claire's past, particularly the part where she had killed Jordan, Kyle's resolve had crumbled. He made a snap decision: he would stand by his son, Harrison, not by the woman who was struggling under the weight of a psychological burden that would break even the strongest of souls. In Kyle's eyes, Claire's actions revealed a lurking darkness that he believed could endanger his son. A few harsh words from Victor, and he turned his back on her. Claire's spiral abandoned in her time of greatest need, Claire found herself unraveling. Jordan's death and her responsibility for it had already cast her into a pit of self-loathing and lingering nightmares. Now, the ache of losing Kyle, her only lifeline, felt like a final blow. Her mind replayed the moment of Kyle's departure over and over, each flash threatening to drag her deeper into the darkness. She wondered if there was truly any way forward. How could she cope with the guilt of killing her former guardian, even if it had been in self-defense or sheer desperation? And how could she face that guilt if she was utterly alone? Victor and Victoria's cold calculation. Victor and Victoria had never trusted Claire. They saw in her not just a survivor of abuse, but someone who might lash out again if cornered. For them, the risk outweighed any sentimentality. They were determined to protect the family, even if it meant destroying a relationship that might have otherwise offered Claire some much-needed stability. But there was another layer: Kyle himself. Over the years, he had caused enough turmoil in the Newman orbit that neither Victor nor Victoria believed he deserved a place in their family. They viewed him as weak, malleable. His quick surrender to Victor's pressure confirmed it. If Kyle was so easily spooked into abandoning Claire, then perhaps he, too, was unworthy of the Newman name. In their eyes, Kyle's betrayal of Claire simply underlined that he was not a loyal partner. He was a fair-weather companion, disappearing at the first crack in the facade of normalcy. Ironically, Victor and Victoria's plan to push Kyle away from Claire also gave them a prime opportunity to have him exit the Newman circle altogether, something they had privately wanted for a while. A history of hurt. Summer and Kyle Summer Newman had once fallen victim to Kyle's indecision and recklessness years ago. She had endured heartbreak and betrayal at his hands, suffering through late-night arguments, abrupt changes of heart, and Kyle's misguided attempts to fix everything with quick solutions that never lasted. Over time, unbelievably, they managed to mend those fractured pieces, forging a bond that even they couldn't have predicted. The two eventually found a sort of peace in each other, enough to consider themselves happy by comparison to their tumultuous past. To outsiders, their reunion felt surreal. How could someone who had caused so much pain end up in a harmonious relationship with the same person he once deeply hurt? Yet that was Kyle's signature move: break it all apart, then show just enough remorse and attention to win back trust, at least temporarily. Summer understood this cycle better than anyone, though for now, she seemed content enough to live within it. The unraveling of alliances with Claire in crisis. Victor and Victoria stood by their decision: Kyle and Claire must end. But for Claire, this abrupt rejection was more than just a heartbreak. It was further proof that no one would stand by her when secrets or bloodshed surfaced. She had been cast as a murderer, a lost cause. Kyle's exit seemed final. Under Victor's influence, he was determined to keep Harrison away from a woman he now saw as unstable and dangerous. It didn't matter to him that Claire might have been forced into her violent act by extreme circumstances. It didn't matter that she was already grappling with the haunting aftermath. All he saw was a threat, and he took the easy route. He fled. As for the Newman family, they made no effort to pick up Claire's broken pieces. That was never part of their plan. From the start, Claire had been a complication, a ticking time bomb. Now, as far as they were concerned, she was Kyle's problem, or, more accurately, had been Kyle's problem before he left her. A lonely road ahead, so Claire is left isolated, with no guiding hand to help her navigate her shattered psyche. The nightmares of Jordan's death grow more vivid, and the sense of betrayal by Kyle leaves her drowning in sorrow. She truly doesn't know if she can survive this emotional onslaught alone. Meanwhile, Victor and Victoria watch from the sidelines, satisfied that they've accomplished two objectives at once. They have undermined Claire's standing in the family and driven Kyle, the weak link, further to the periphery. Whether or not Kyle stays with the family is no longer crucial. What matters is that he has severed ties with the woman who might have posed a threat. But in a world as volatile as Genoa City's, no decision is ever truly final. Guilt, regret, and lingering affection have a way of resurfacing at the most inopportune moments. And while Kyle currently seeks refuge in Summer's arms, old wounds have a habit of reopening. Especially when someone as vulnerable as Claire has been pushed to the brink, because sometimes, the line between victim and villain is razor thin. The question remains, with Claire's heart in tatters, will she fade into the shadows of her trauma, or will her desperation ignite something far more dangerous? If there's one universal truth in this unfolding drama, it's that the Newman family's attempts to control every outcome often plant the seeds for future turmoil. And this time, the seeds may have taken root in the wounded heart of Claire, a place from which betrayal and heartbreak can bloom into something truly unpredictable.